Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. Another thing that I had my eye out for this week is rising political talent, because parties use these conventions and these speaking slots to showcase some of their younger potential future leaders. There were two speeches in pretty quick succession on Wednesday that at least the audience members around me were pretty taken with. Let's listen to a bit of the introduction by Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg.
I never thought I'd hear myself saying, "I'm Pete Buttigieg, and you might recognize me from Fox News." I believe in going anywhere, in service of a good cause, and friends, we gather in a very good cause, electing Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, the next president and vice president of the United States.
And here is Wes Moore, the new governor of Maryland, sworn in last year.
My training taught me that you never learn anything about anybody when times are easy. You learn everything you need to know about somebody when times are hard and when the temperature gets turned up. And America, I saw that Kamala Harris is the right one to lead in this moment firsthand. And united with the Almighty God's grace, we brought closure to the families of the 6 victims. And while many said it could take 11 months to reopen the Port of Baltimore, we got it done in 11 weeks.
Pete Buttigieg is 42. Wes Moore is 45 years old. After Mayor Pete finished speaking, one of the Democratic volunteers sitting by me said this: he's going to be president someday, in a pretty enthusiastic manner. Kim, anybody this week who grabbed you? I guess a couple more I would add. I thought Gretchen Whitmer last night, the governor of Michigan, seemed to have some charisma with the crowd. On the other hand, Josh Shapiro, the Pennsylvania governor and mooted as a possible running mate for Kamala Harris, I found him a little underwhelming.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is always what conventions do too. As Bill was saying, they're these pre-planned productions. You control the narrative, and it's this amazing opportunity for the younger generation in a party to make a mark and get some national attention, and at least get the attention of all the people who matter, which are all the insiders and delegates to the party. We saw that. How many times have we seen, this was Barack Obama's making the infamous speech he gave at one of the conventions, which really launched him as a national person. So they had a lot of those. And one thing that's really interesting about this, too, is that the leadership of the Democratic Party, as this has been the discussion this summer, is quite aged. Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, who recently stepped down as a speaker. Obviously, we now have Hakeem Jeffries. He was another person I thought was up on stage, did a good job just talking about new influences. There's not a lot of spring chickens. We saw Bernie Sanders up there, again, a kind of oldster. So they do have this bench, a lot of governors in particular, some people who are in the cabinet already. And the one thing, though, that really struck me, Kyle, watching all of these faces, and it's a little off topic from what you're asking about, but I was really struck that there was not a person showcased, not just in terms of prime time, but the folks they rolled out that had any deviation whatsoever from the standard progressive line. And that means, where are some of the Joe Manchins in the party, the Dean Phillip types who had a little bit of distance in terms of the direction they're going? There's quite a few of those members in the House. There's not a lot of diversity up on that stage in terms of intellectual thought these days. I think that's very different than what you see in the Republican Party. It's having a big discussion at the moment about some of the more populist wing of the party versus some of the more Reagan-esque wing of the party, all of whom had a forum on that stage at the Republican convention. This was one message, and it's another proof that the progressives are the sort of next bench in the DNC.
Finally, one thing today, this afternoon, that could nudge this presidential race. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the third-party independent candidate, is expected to drop out of the race. He is supposed to speak at 2 p.m. Eastern in Arizona about the present historical moment and his path forward, according to his campaign. And that is a few hours before President Trump is going to hold a rally, and Trump is teasing that he will be joined by a special guest. So, Bill, there is speculation, not confirmed, that RFK Jr. may drop out of the race and may be considering endorsing President Trump. What do you suppose the effect of that would be on what still looks like a very close contest between Trump and Harris?
Well, I think it would come down to individual states. I agree with you. Normally, I would kind of dismiss it at this point. His support has gone way down. But some of these states were decided by just a few thousand votes. And if Kennedy could bring that to Trump, that could make the difference in one or two swing states. That said, I'm not sure that people today, because he endorsed Donald Trump, they would go along with it. I think a lot of the party was founded on a disgust at two parties. You know, people in third parties generally campaign on the idea the other two parties are just frickin' frack, and I'm providing a real difference. And then to go off and endorse Frick, I'm not sure it really has the effect. On the other hand, I do wonder the spectacle of a Kennedy, even an outcast, a black sheep like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., endorsing a Republican and endorsing a Donald Trump Republican must make heads blow up in the Kennedy compound.
Kim, we'll give you the last word, but what's your view on this? And it's true that Kennedy's polling has dipped in recent days, maybe related to some of these embarrassing stories that have come out in the press about his past. On the other hand, to Bill's point, if he is at 4 or 5 or, even 2 or 3% in some of these states, and if some of those voters decide after he leaves the race, if that's what indeed happens, that they're still interested in coming out to the polls and supporting a candidate, that could really make a difference in a tight race.
Here's what's worrying some Democrats I talked to at the convention. Yes, RFK's polling has dipped in particular over the last month or so. That is, as you note, concurrent with some of these bad headlines and stories, but it is also concurrent with Kamala Harris's entry into this race. And there's a belief that there were a lot of people who were supporting RFK that were dissatisfied in general with Trump as a candidate, but also Biden as a candidate. And that once Biden decided not to run, those voters went back to the Democratic camp, to Kamala. And so what's left among Kennedy's supporters would probably largely break in favor of Trump. That is at least, I think, a working theory and one that seems to have some basis in reality. And so if he comes out and endorses, I agree. I don't know that Trump would get all of Kennedy's supporters. There might be some still there that might go to a Jill Stein, for instance, another third-party candidate, some that might head back to Kamala. But in races that are as close as they are right now, and by the way, the battleground is basically a dead heat, whatever the polls say, that could really make a difference. We know from elections past that third-party candidates nationally, they don't tend to have a lot of matter in an election, but on battlegrounds, they absolutely can.
Thank you, Kim and Bill. Thank you all for listening. You can email us your own convention notes at pwpodcast@wsj.com. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back next week with another edition of Potomac Watch.